Cory Walker, adult organizer in Pop Smoke's murder. In February 2020, Brooklyn rapper Pop Smoke was just 20 years old, riding a wave of breakout success when his life was cut short in Los Angeles. A group of 4 intruders broke into the Hollywood Hills rental where he was staying. They were after cash and jewelry, a quick hit they thought would make them rich. Among them was Cory Walker, the only adult in the crew. While 2 teens stormed the house and 1 pulled the trigger, prosecutors said Walker played the role of planner and getaway driver. Pop Smoke was shot during the home invasion, and the group fled with his luxury watch, later sold for just a few $1,000s. The killing stunned both the rap world and law enforcement, who pointed out how senseless it was. An artist on the verge of superstardom killed over trinkets. In 2025, Walker accepted a plea deal for voluntary manslaughter and robbery. The judge handed him 29 years in prison, far less than life, but still enough to ensure most of his adulthood is spent behind bars. His younger accomplices, tried separately, had already faced their own juvenile sentences, leaving Walker to shoulder the adult responsibility for a crime that shook music culture. The Notorious B.I.G. unsolved murder, no convictions. Christopher, the Notorious B.I.G. Wallace was 24 when a lone gunman fired into his SUV after a music industry party in Los Angeles on March 9, 1997. He died within minutes, and the killing instantly became one of hip-hop's defining traumas. Police collected witness accounts and ballistics, mapped traffic light timing, and chased leads that stretched from local gang conflicts to theories about corrupt officers and industry beefs. None of it produced a criminal conviction. A federal civil suit later exposed investigative gaps and overlapping allegations, but the criminal case remained stalled. No named defendant was ever tried for Biggie's murder. Over the years, documentaries and books have proposed competing narratives, some centering street rivalries, others pointing at individuals tied to law enforcement or music circles, but each stops short of courtroom proof. The official record, nearly 3 decades on, is simple and unsatisfying. Homicide by an unknown assailant, investigation open, no arrest leading to a jury verdict. For scripting, the only safe ground is the human cost and the vacuum that followed. Biggie's 2-album run had already changed rap. His death froze that arc in place and left fans, family, and the city with questions that outlived most of the original witnesses. Timothy, Lil Tim leaks. Shooter in King Von's killing. Charge dismissed. No conviction. Davon King Von Bennett was shot outside an Atlanta lounge on November 6, 2020, after a fight between entourages erupted into gunfire. Police quickly identified Timothy, Lil Tim Leaks, as the man who fired the shots that struck Von, citing surveillance video and on-scene evidence. Leaks was arrested and charged with murder while recovering from his own injuries. From the start, the defense signaled a self-defense posture, arguing the brawl and sudden gunfire created a split-second survival decision. The case moved through multiple resets as prosecutors evaluated evidence and witness availability. In 2023, the Fulton County District Attorney's Office dismissed the murder charge against Leaks, citing prosecutorial discretion and evidentiary issues that undercut the likelihood of a conviction. Dismissal did not equal a declaration of innocence. It simply ended the state's case without a trial on the merits. Legally, that leaves the public record in a narrow lane. Police named Leaks as the shooter. The DA later dropped the case, and no jury weighed self-defense against homicide. For your narrative, the precise framing matters. Von was killed during a violent street altercation. The identified shooter was never convicted. The questions around motive and justification remain unresolved. Terry Oni and McCoy Walker, killers of Magnolia Shorty. Renetta Magnolia Shorty. Low was a beloved New Orleans bounce star whose rapid-fire chants pulsed through clubs long before streaming made the genre global. In December 2010, she and Jerome, Man Hampton, were chased into an apartment complex and shot dozens of times in a rolling ambush that looked and felt like a battlefield. For years, the case sat inside a larger tapestry of gang warfare that blurred witness memories and terrified neighborhoods. Federal RICO prosecutors finally pulled the threads together in the sprawling 39ers case, arguing that members of a hybrid crew carried out murders to enforce turf and reputation. In 2017, a jury tied Terry Oni and McCoy Walker to multiple killings, including the double murder of Hampton and Lowe. The court framed the motive as murder in aid of racketeering, retaliation, and reputation inside a violent enterprise, rather than any music dispute. When the sentences came down, they were absolute. Mandatory life for the murder counts, stacked atop other life terms and long federal time. The judgment put names to a crime that had haunted a city and preserved in the record how a local icon was swallowed by a gang feud far removed from the joy her music sparked. The O Block 6, Killers of FBG Duck. Chicago drill star Carlton FBG Duck Weekly was shot in broad daylight on Oak Street in the city's luxury Gold Coast on August 4, 2020, an audacious surgical attack that wounded bystanders and sent shoppers diving for cover. Federal agents and Chicago police built a racketeering case instead of a simple local murder file, arguing the hit was a coordinated mission by O Block members in a years-long feud with rivals from the South Side. After a 3-month trial, a federal jury convicted 6 men: Charles C. Murda Liggins, Kenneth Kenny Mac Robertson, Christopher C. Thang Thomas, Marcus Muop Smart, Carlos Laws Offord, and Ralph T.Z. Turpin of murder in aid of racketeering and related counts. Prosecutors said the motive was gang retaliation and status. The law called it vicar, murder to advance a criminal enterprise, with a mandatory life sentence attached to the top count. Families packed the courtroom as the verdicts landed in January 2024, a rare moment of certainty in a city used to unsolved rapper homicides. Sentences were scheduled across late summer and fall, with the vicar convictions carrying automatic life terms. The case left a stark record: a planned assassination executed on a crowded block to score points in a feud that had already claimed too many young lives. Freddie Lee Trone, organizer in PnB Rock's killing. The daylight murder of PnB Rock at a Roscoe's Chicken and Waffles in Los Angeles was a chilling reminder of how quickly fame can make someone a target. In September 2022, the Philadelphia rapper was dining with his girlfriend when Freddie Lee Trone spotted him wearing expensive jewelry. Trone, accompanied by his teenage son, orchestrated a robbery on the spot. Prosecutors said Trone directed the boy to enter the restaurant and confront Rock at gunpoint. Within minutes, shots rang out, leaving the rapper fatally wounded as diners scrambled in horror. The entire scene was captured by surveillance, leaving little doubt about who had planned the crime. The motive was straightforward greed, yet the coldness of sending his own child to do the killing stunned the court. In September 2024, Trone was sentenced to 31 years to life, sealing his fate in the California prison system. His son, a juvenile, faced separate proceedings, and Trone's wife pled guilty as an accessory. The case showed not just how vulnerable rappers are in public, but also the ripple effect of desperation and poor choices that turned a family into perpetrators of one of hip-hop's most shocking killings. Michael Boatwright, Trayvon Newsom, and Dedrick Williams, killers of XXX Tentacion. In June 2018, rising Florida star XXX Tentacion was ambushed in broad daylight outside Riva Motorsports. He had just turned 20, his career exploding with a massive online following and billboard hits. What awaited him in the parking lot was not another fan encounter, but a planned robbery. 3 men, Michael Boatwright, the gunman, with Trayvon Newsom and Dedrick Williams as accomplices, spotted him shopping for a motorcycle. They boxed his car in, weapons drawn, and in the struggle, Boatwright fired the fatal shots. Prosecutors said the motive was simple greed. They wanted his Louis Vuitton bag, cash, and status symbols that came with targeting a celebrity. The brazen nature of the attack, carried out in public view, stunned fans worldwide and turned the courtroom into a spectacle years later. In 2023, after years of delays, the 3 men were convicted. Boatwright received 2 consecutive life sentences plus 30 years, while Newsom and Williams were handed life without parole. Their sentences reflect both the senselessness of the crime and the permanence of its consequences. 3 men will die behind bars, and one of rap's most controversial but influential voices was silenced at its peak. Eric R. Holder Jr., killer of Nipsey Hussle. Nipsey Hussle's murder in March 2019 was not the result of random violence, but a dispute that spiraled into tragedy. Outside his Marathon clothing store in Los Angeles, the Grammy-nominated rapper and entrepreneur confronted Eric R. Holder Jr., a man he had known from the neighborhood. Witnesses testified that Nipsey mentioned rumors of Holder cooperating with police. Those words cut deep in a culture where accusations of snitching can ruin reputations, or worse. Holder left the conversation, only to return minutes later with 2 handguns. He opened fire, hitting Nipsey multiple times in front of stunned bystanders, before kicking him on the ground in an act prosecutors called cold-blooded. The community erupted in grief, with fans and civic leaders mourning not just an artist, but a figure investing in local development and anti-gang efforts. The trial stretched for years, but ended in February 2023, with Holder convicted of first-degree murder. The judge imposed a sentence of 60 years to life, ensuring he will never walk free again. For many, the punishment brought legal closure, but it could never replace the loss of a man who had turned his life into a blueprint for uplift and resilience. Carl Jordan Jr. and Ronald Washington, killers of Jam Master Jay. For 2 decades, the murder of Jason Jam Master Jay Mizell haunted hip-hop as one of its deepest mysteries. The Run DMC DJ was gunned down in his Queens recording studio in 2002, with no arrest for years despite witnesses being present. The silence was finally broken in 2020 when federal prosecutors unsealed indictments against Carl Jordan Jr. and Ronald Washington, 2 men long linked to the streets around Mizell. At trial, witnesses testified that Mizell had cut Washington out of a drug deal, sparking a deadly grudge. Jordan, just 18 at the time, was accused of pulling the trigger, while Washington acted as a lookout. Prosecutors painted the murder as an execution tied not to music, but to narcotics, revealing a side of Mizell's life many fans never knew existed. In February 2024, both men were convicted of murder in aid of racketeering, a federal charge carrying mandatory decades behind bars. They now await sentencing, facing terms that will likely keep them locked away for life. For the hip-hop community, the convictions closed a chapter that had lingered unresolved for 21 years, bringing a measure of justice for a pioneer whose beats had once defined an era of rap's rise. Justin Johnson, shooter of Young Dolph. Memphis rapper Adolph Young Dolph Thornton Jr. was known for independence and pride in his city, but his life ended violently in November 2021 when gunmen ambushed him outside Makaida's Homemade Butter Cookies, a bakery he frequented. Surveillance footage showed 2 men firing dozens of rounds, sending shockwaves through a community that had seen Dolph as more than an artist. He was a mentor and philanthropist. Among the men later arrested was Justin Johnson, a local with ties to the city's rap scene. Prosecutors argued Johnson was one of the shooters, carrying out a premeditated hit connected to rivalries and whispered bounties. The case became a symbol of how Memphis's rap feud spilled into deadly reality. In September 2024, a jury convicted Johnson of first-degree murder. A month later, a judge added 35 more years for conspiracy and gun charges, stacking on top of a life sentence. The punishment cemented Johnson's fate. He will never walk free. For fans, the trial was a bitter victory, justice served, but no bringing back Dolph's voice, his dedication to independent artistry, or his habit of handing out turkeys at Thanksgiving to the same community that later mourned him. Mako Buchanan, shooter in Le Capone's murder. Leonard La Capone Anderson was a teenager stepping out of a Chicago studio in September 2013 when a car eased by and shots cracked the night. The ambush fit a grim pattern, a rising drill rapper caught in the long shadow of neighborhood rivalries. Detectives traced the attack to a crew that included Mako Buchanan, who prosecutors said circled the block and opened fire as Anderson exited the building with friends. The motive was retaliation, an attack meant to score points in a feud that had already claimed other young men. La Capone's death hit the city's rap scene hard. He had just begun to find his voice, appearing on crew records and sketching out a solo lane that would never arrive. In 2016, a Cook County jury found Buchanan guilty of first-degree murder, and the court imposed a 45-year sentence. Appellate records later affirmed the conviction, leaving little doubt about the case's evidentiary spine, eyewitness accounts corroborating details, and the familiar, tragic context of gang conflict. For fans, the verdict closed a chapter, but not the wound. Another Chicago hopeful was gone, leaving behind songs that sound like introductions to a career that ended at the starting line. Mario Etheridge, shooter in Proof's death, no murder conviction. The chaotic minutes that ended Deshaun Proof Holton's life unfolded inside a Detroit after-hours club in April 2006. What witnesses described was a barroom confrontation that escalated into 2 separate shootings. Army veteran Keith Bender Jr. was shot. Proof then fired, and club bouncer Mario Etheridge, Bender's cousin, drew his own weapon and fired at Proof. Prosecutors never charged Etheridge with murder. Instead, a Wayne County jury found him guilty of 2 weapons offenses, carrying a concealed weapon and discharging a firearm in a building, while authorities accepted that he shot in lawful defense of another. The judge sentenced Etheridge to time served on the concealed weapon count and imposed a $2,000 fine for the discharge offense, sparing him additional jail time. The legal outcome left Detroit divided. One of Eminem's closest friends was dead. Another man, Bender, would also die from his wounds, and Etheridge walked out with a misdemeanor-level penalty and a felony on his record. In the court file and contemporaneous reporting, the case stands less as a music hit than a tragic alcohol-soaked confrontation where a defensive shot became the final round in a deadly chain reaction. Dwayne Keith D. Davis, accused organizer in Tupac Shakur's killing, charged, trial pending. Nearly 3 decades after the 1996 Las Vegas drive-by that killed Tupac Shakur, Nevada prosecutors charged Dwayne Keith D. Davis with orchestrating the attack. The state's theory leans on Davis's own past statements to police and in media, claims that he supplied the gun and greenlit retaliation after a casino floor beating of his nephew, paired with long-running gang retaliation context. Davis pleaded not guilty, with his lawyers arguing about those prior statements, which they claim were puffed-up storytelling, given under supposed assurances that they wouldn't be used against him. In February 2025, a Clark County judge postponed the trial to February 9, 2026, citing defense preparation needs and new developments. That means the case is very much alive, but unresolved. There's no jury finding yet on motive or participation, only the prosecution's narrative and Davis's denials. Until a verdict lands, the most accurate framing is alleged organizer, with the caveat that the court has set a firm 2026 trial window, and the defense is still litigating dismissal attempts in higher courts. It's the rare homicide that still commands headlines, not just for who Tupac was, but for how long the legal system has taken to confront what happened on that Vegas Strip.